hidden working. Otherwise, you won't be able to hear me, which might be a blessing to some of you. Butch McComas offered to come up here with me this morning, and I don't know why he's not here, but thanks, Butch, for bailing. Oh, no. Yeah, I don't really need you. Although now that you've stood, I may think of a use for you here in a moment. As Eric said, I spent a lot of time thinking about this text and puzzling why on earth he gave me the hardest text from Joshua. If you've ever read through Joshua, you know that it's got a lot of really good material, but it's got a lot of really tough material at the same time. These aren't things that we can, I think, simply gloss over. I'm going to get to that in a moment. So if you're like me, as a parent, we've got a lot of parents in here. Thank you, Michael, for getting your screaming child out. Bye, Patton. Poor boy. Poor boy. I don't know how many of you as parents told yourself this. I did before we had kids, and I distinctly remember telling Rachel this. I'm never going to use the "because I said so" excuse. Did anybody else do that? Is it I'm all alone? All right, well, such is life. Well, I did that. I told myself, I'm never going to use that excuse, right? My kids deserve a reason, right? They're my kids. They deserve to know why. Yeah, people back there are laughing at me. It's pretty silly, actually. But I remember distinctly feeling that and thinking that. I'm always going to give my kids a reason because they deserve to know why I've chosen something. And I don't necessarily disagree with that now, but on multiple occasions and multiple times in a row, I've said, because I said so, It's the go-to response. And the truth is, I don't think that's all bad. Today we're going to be looking at obedience and more specifically for our own lives, sin. And I think God says that to us. Because I've said so. Do we have the trust in Him, the faith in Him, the hope in Him to say, okay, because you have said it, God, that's what I should do. And that's a really tough thing to do. It certainly is not an easy thing for me to do all the time with God. Okay, God, because you've said so, that's what I'll do. As I mentioned, this section of Joshua is very difficult for me. I don't know if any of you have read through this section before and struggled with it like I have, but this is one of the favorite texts for skeptics to go to and say, aha, yeah, this is why I can't worship your God. This is why I can't trust your God. This is why I can't have faith in the God that you serve. Because this text is hard. It's difficult. And I want to offer, though we're not going to dwell here long, I want to offer a couple of things that maybe soften the blow a little bit of a difficult text like this. There is no easy solution to make this text more palatable. It is tough, but it's here for a reason. The first thing that I want to talk about is we have this. From beginning to end, we have this. The Israelites, when they were conquering the Promised Land, didn't. But this is ours now. We know the end. We know that they enter the Promised Land. We know that they reject God. We know that God sends Assyria and Babylon to reclaim the land and to capture His chosen people. And we know that He sends a Messiah. We know that He sends a Savior who dies for us so that we can have hope. We have the Bible in its final form. If you flip over to Judges, Joshua 10 through 12 is all about all the peoples that were completely destroyed by Joshua and the Israelites. But if you turn over to Judges, you actually see they didn't actually wipe them all out. Now that doesn't take away from the command to do it, but it didn't happen completely. Some of the Canaanites were left. But secondly, and even more importantly, I think what's going on here is something that we can look back at in Leviticus. I know Gordon's going to love this reference. I just had to pull it out for for Gordon. It's Leviticus 18. Gordon probably can quote it right now. And I love that because I'm an Old Testament guy myself, Gordon. When we sin, we do not just affect ourselves. We affect the people around us, and even beyond that, we affect the very ground on which we walk. From Leviticus 18, verses 24 through 30. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways. We've just gone through talking about in Leviticus sexual sin and idol worship. So God begins here, do not defile yourselves in any of these ways. For the people I am driving out before you, that is the Canaanites, all these people we're going to talk about today, defiled themselves in all these ways. Because the entire land has become defiled, I am punishing the people who live there. Notice he doesn't just say the people are defiled. The entire land is defiled. And in fact, the land here becomes personified. I will cause the land to vomit them out. You must obey all my decrees and regulations. You must not commit any of these detestable sins. This applies both to native-born Israelites and to the foreigners living among you. All these detestable activities are practiced by the people of the land where I am taking you, and this is how the land has become defiled. So do not defile the land and give it a reason to vomit you out, as it will vomit out the people who live there now. Whoever commits any of these detestable sins will be cut off from the community of Israel. So obey my instructions and do not defile yourselves by committing any of these detestable practices that were committed by the people who lived in the land before you. I am the Lord your God. It's not as simple as they sinned and hurt themselves. They hurt the very land, the very ground in which they lived. And I think Paul picks up on this idea in Romans chapter 8. If you want to turn there, that's the last place we'll go before we head to Joshua 10. But I think Paul picks up on this language and this idea in Romans 8, verses 18 through 25. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. For all creation is waiting eagerly for that future day when God will reveal who his children really are. Against its will, creation was subjected to God's curse. And what curse was that? You got to go back to Genesis 1, right? It was us. It was because of us that creation has been subjected to this kind of torment. But with eager hope, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. For we know that all creation has been groaning as in the chains of childbirth right up to the present time. Now, I've never given birth. That might give comfort to some of you. But my wife has. And my understanding, those moms who are in here, is it hurts? Is that fair? Okay. Creation groans as with the pains of childbirth to be free from the torture that we have subjected it to. Your sin isn't as simple as belongs to you. You hurt other people around you, and you hurt the very creation that God has given to us. Sin's a big deal. God couldn't allow the Canaanites any longer to sin in the ways that they were. He had to put a stop to it. It was hurting him too much to see and to go through what they were doing. Again, that doesn't make this text easy, but I hope that maybe it helps give you an understanding, at least minimally, of what's happening here. So we're going to turn to Joshua 10 now. And I've got 5 points. I know I'm deviating from the standard 3. You'll have to forgive me. And I'm actually going to repeat the 5 points, so I've got 10, really. But I figured that was pretty good. I've got 10 fingers, so I've got 10 points. We're going to go through them. The first is the simple idea of obedience. God, in the first chapter of Joshua, commands Joshua to enter the land and possess it. And while they've been doing that to a minimal degree up to now, the first 9 chapters, really in chapter 10 is where we get this long list, as Eric talked about. We have this long list of these really kind of city-states that are all over Canaan that they have to go in and drive out, wipe out. And so chapters 10 through 12 are Joshua and the Israelites fulfilling that command of God. So God has commanded Joshua to take leadership in ridding the land of sin so God's people could occupy it. It is time for the Israelites to come into their fulfillment. The promise that they've been given way back with Abraham, when he was originally Abram, God is now finally doing, after hundreds of years, what they've been waiting and anticipating for so long. Joshua did his part thoroughly in leading the people. I want you to look at verses 40 through 43. We're not going to read all 3 chapters, but we're going to hit some highlights. So Joshua conquered the whole region, the kings and people of the hill country, the Negev and western foothills, and the mountain slopes. He completely destroyed everyone in the land, leaving no survivors, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua slaughtered them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, and from the region around the town of Goshen up to Gibeon. Joshua conquered all these kings and their land in a single campaign, for the Lord, the God of Israel, was fighting for his people. Then Joshua and the Israelite army returned to their camp at Gilgal. So we see here that Joshua has trusted in God. He has been obedient to God's calling on his life to do this. My second point is, though, that the truth is this really isn't about Joshua and the Israelites. God gives these success. 12 times through chapters 10 and 11, chapter 12 really is a list of names, essentially, of the people, the kings, and the places that the Israelites conquered. Chapters 10 and 11 are narrative that we can draw from. 12 times, it should be up there. Yeah, it's up there. 12 times, it actually says, this is because of God. God fought for his people. God gave them success. I think that's significant for us. We're going to talk about that in a minute, how it's significant for us, but God is the one who does this for his people. Joshua can't do this on his own. The Israelites can't do this on their own. It is because of who God is. It is because of his faithfulness to his people that this happens and that they are given success. Point number 3. Joshua and the Israelites completely destroyed the Canaanites who stood in their way. And this word for completely destroyed, different translations have it translated differently, but the word in Hebrew is the same, haram. And it's a really tough word because it actually means complete destruction. So when Joshua and the Israelites go into a city and they completely destroy it, the idea is every man, woman, child, animal is gone. That's hard and that's tough. But again, because of the sin, because of the way that the Canaanites have defiled the land, God has to act. He uses his people to do this. And this word is used 9 times throughout Joshua. Well, throughout these 2 chapters, and hardly anywhere else is this word used. But it gives that kind of weight, that kind of gravity, that impact, that the Israelites completely destroyed the people. Number 4, choosing to obey God is not something that Joshua can rely on Moses any longer for. Remember, this command was actually given to Moses. Before Moses was kept out of the promised land, God wanted the Israelites to go in and wipe the people out from before the time of Moses. Joshua inherits this command and he obeys it. He no longer has Moses to rely on. Moses isn't there any longer to make that tough choice for him to say, Joshua, go do this. Joshua, make sure that this happens. Joshua has to do this. He has to choose. It's up to him. Obedience is something, as much as we try to get people to obey us, as much as I try to get my kids to obey me or to get Rachel to obey me, it just never happens. Because they're free-willed people. The same is true of all of us. Whether we choose to follow God is not up to someone else. Nobody's making you be here this morning. Nobody will make you be here a week from now. You following God is your choice and yours alone. And point number 5, Joshua and the Israelites fought for many years to conquer the parts of the land they conquered. Now, this is something that we can sit down in a reading. You take 10 minutes, you can read through this, through these 3 chapters. You can read through this great campaign in one sitting. But the truth is, and different scholars estimate different times, but this took up to potentially decades, but as little as maybe 7 years. But we're not talking about a short amount of time. This is a good, long time that the people have been fighting for their land. Have been fighting to rid the land of this sin that's there. So let's talk about how this matters to us. We're going to go back through these 5 points. Because the truth is, as God gave Moses and Joshua a command to take the land, He has commanded us to rid our lives of sin. Perhaps you are doing better right now in your life than you've done at other times, but He has commanded us to rid our lives of sin. I, like you, struggle with that. Struggle with ridding my own life of sin. This isn't an easy thing to do. But when God orders us to stop sinning, we shouldn't pause to debate it, consider other options, to try to negotiate a compromise with God, or rationalize the sin that's in our life. Instead, like Joshua and like the Israelites, our response should be swift and complete. We must be ruthless in avoiding relationships and activities that can lead us into sin. God has called you to get rid of sin in your life. And at various times you're going to be better than others. I mean, it's just how it is. The cycle of life of ups and downs. But you can do it because of point number 2, that God helped you succeed in getting rid of sin in your life. Remember, it wasn't because of the Israelites that they conquered the land. It was because of God. And it won't be because of you that you're able to get rid of sin in your life. It will be because of what God does for you. Don't mistake that. Don't think that you are in the place of being the one in charge. Eric had a great illustration several weeks back about God being our co-pilot, right? And how that actually maybe not be the best thing, that God is actually the one in charge. He is the head. Don't mistake your place. You have a part to play, but you're not the one who forgives yourself. God forgives you of your sin. You obey God in getting rid of the sin, but it's because of Him. And when we honor Him, He honors us by helping us complete this getting rid of sin. And the third point is that we need to make sure, just like the Israelites and Joshua completely destroyed the Canaanites, we need to be sure that we are completely rid of sin. You probably know people who were able at some point to get rid of a sin in their life and then fell back into it, right? You yourself have probably been in that position. Why did they fall back in? Why did you fall back in? It usually has to do with the fact that we've allowed ourselves still this foothold for sin in our life, right? Maybe I no longer want to be a drunk, but I still want to go hang out with my friends at the bar. Doesn't really work that way, does it? Or I really want to stop gossiping, but I still want to hang out with all the people I always hung out with who gossip just as much as I do. It's hard to get rid of sin whenever we still allow those things that influenced us to sin in those ways to be there. So when we get rid of sin, we have to completely rid our lives of those sins. Like Joshua and the Israelites, we have to destroy those things that are there that continue to cause us to sin. And the fourth point is that the choice is up to you. I can't make the choice for you. God can't even make the choice for you. You have to decide whether you want to follow God in this way. You have to decide whether you want to get rid of sin in your life. And that's often a difficult choice because the truth is sometimes we don't want to get rid of sin, do we? Sometimes sin feels good. Sometimes it makes us happy. So it's difficult for us to make that choice, but you and you alone are the only one who can make it. We can't always control our understanding of what's going on because we don't always have the facts. We can't control what other people do to us. What we can control is who we are and what we do and how we do or don't obey God. The choice was up to Joshua, and that choice is up to us now. Will you follow or will you not? Are you choosing to obey God or are you choosing to not obey God? Are you choosing to rid your life of sin or are you choosing to allow it to stay around? Are you choosing to stay in those sins? And point number 5, the conquest of our hearts, that is removing sin, isn't a quick process. I would venture to guess that if I talked to several of you, you'd say that you've been struggling with the same sin for years upon years upon years. But here's the cool thing. God's not done with you yet. Just because you haven't been able to get rid of that sin in your life doesn't mean that God's given up on you. Doesn't mean that he wants you to change, choosing to obey him and choosing to try to get rid of it. You're imperfect and you're going to remain imperfect. Just like Joshua and the Israelites couldn't conquer a whole land in a day, we can't conquer the sin that's in our life tonight. You can't go home and immediately stop sinning completely. That's not going to happen. Unless you want to become a monk or a nun, which would be kind of cool. If you sign up for that, let me know. I'm interested to hear how that goes. But my guess is you're not. And so you, like me, are going to struggle for years to come with the sin that's in your life. You, like me, are going to continue over the next several years to try to get rid of sin that haunts you, that plagues you, that brings you down. It's okay. Because God's not done with you yet. He doesn't give up on you just because for 5 years you've been struggling with the same sin, or for 20 years, or for 30 years. God's not done with you. He's not done with us. As his people, he never gives up on us. And tonight, as part of life groups, as you look at the questions, if you look at the questions, I want you to really emphasize who in your life helps you deal with these things. And if you can't name somebody, if there isn't somebody that you can go to talk about sin that's in your life, to get help, somebody that's going to comfort you, somebody that's going to pray for you, that needs to change immediately. Because just like Joshua couldn't have gone in on his own to conquer the land, you too can't do this by yourself. God gives you victory, but we help each other as well. We, as his body, do that for each other. And right now, we're going to have a time of that as we sing this song. We offer that chance for you to get that help that you need. If you're struggling with something in your life, if there's a sin that you need help with, or any need that you have, we have shepherds in the front that are going to be here to pray for you, to help you, to welcome you, to be God in your life. I pray, I hope that as you struggle with sin, as you continue to struggle with sin, that you, like Joshua and the Israelites, don't give up. If it doesn't happen tomorrow just the way you want, don't give up on yourself, because God hasn't given up on you. Let's stand and sing.